I'd like to start off. What we're talking about today is not psychology. This is strictly a behavior assessment. It was developed by Bill Marston in 1926. And I would say at least 95% or more of all the behavior assessments done in the United States today are done based on Bill Marston's model, going back to 26. It's been updated. This one is computerized. The company I use that I buy these from is TTI. It's out of Phoenix. They do about 350,000 of these. And the reason I selected this, my tab members, 20 years ago, wanted help in selecting people for their company, for employment, and to improve holding people accountable in their organization. So I went out and did research, looked at Myers-Briggs and some of the others that you might be familiar with, and I selected this assessment because I liked the report so much, and these folks have verified their system in their assessment process over 3,000 times scientifically. So if you take the report, you take the assessment quickly, you're probably going to have a pretty accurate assessment of your style. We call it your behavioral style. There's three parts of all folks. What, how, and why. The what is your skills, your talent, your education, your training. When people are interviewed, we spend most of the time focused on the what. What knowledge and skills do they bring to the table? I personally believe your behavior, your how, is at least 5 times more important than your what. All of this what is education. We've learned it, which means that we can teach people the skill sets that we want them to know, including ourselves. We can't teach behavior. We can understand it, we can't change it. It's pretty well locked in. It's been millions and billions, if we get our philosopher friend, of impressions that have been made on you personality-wise that have created the personality you have. I never ask anybody to change your personality. If you don't like the way you behave, think about it and you can control it. And we'll go into that. I wish I'd have brought my assessment or at least a picture of it because it's not pretty. Alexi and I are both off the charts, not that warm, fuzzy personality type thing. But I put so much emphasis in the how. And that's what we're going to focus on today. That's all we're talking about today. Till the very end, we're going to talk about values, which is the why. Why do we behave the way we do? Often, your values, which is the second assessment, drives what you do, what your interests are, as does your behavior, can drive your experiences and what you're interested in doing. But they're not directly related because you can get engineers with all different types of personalities, you can get doctors with different personalities, you can get entertainers with totally different personalities. It affects it, which the reason for this seminar today is that you understand your particular behavioral style. Once you do that, you sort of master the art of communication. And it is one of the most important things we do. Our lives are built around all the relationships that we have in our lives. And it's based in the communication style and how well we communicate with others. It really doesn't matter exactly what your behavioral style is, and we'll go over this in just a few minutes. It's really your understanding of who you are and how you interrelate with the world around you. There's 4 parts of the assessment, the DISC model as we call it. Myers-Briggs, while they don't never show you a graph as such, it's based on the same basic premise, DISC. Dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance, which is on that page 11 sheet. Dominance. How do you solve problems? Not if you solve problems. How do you solve problems? The I is how do you influence others? Not if. We all influence people around us, but it's how do we do it? The S, the steadiness, is how do you deal with the pace of change? Are you a short order cook like Alexi and I? Or are you a gourmet chef and you do one thing at a time and you try to do it perfectly? Or are you, like most of the world, somewhere in between? And the last one is C, compliance. How do you deal with other people's rules? Do you comply with other people's rules? Or are you a renegade and you're always fighting the rules around you? Most people are offended if they see themselves fairly high in this, because everybody, especially in this day and age, and especially in America, want to be independent. They want to think that they're independent thinkers. You can be a very independent thinker. This is just how do you deal with the rules around you. This is engineers, doctors, lawyers, quality control managers. They follow the rules precisely. Cross T's and dot I's, I guess, is one easy way to do it. We're going to talk about these four personality characteristics in some detail, which is why you have the sheets in front of you. You have your graph, and you should have the assessment. What do you call it? The behavior descriptors, this page. And those words just put in narrative a description so you can better understand what that personality characteristic is supposed to be about it. While we're going through this, I've got this energy line here. It's at 50% on your graph. And it's quite important because your personality is defined by how far you are from the energy line, whether you're below or above the energy line. Alexi, do you have your graph? I'll be using you to make fun of T's. I didn't know you were such a wimpy D.
I know.
Wow. I'm 100% D. That's not fun to be around. It's not a warm, fuzzy personality, but we all know how outgoing Alexi is, which is shown on his eye. How does he influence others? He does it with a lot of energy, personality, almost overwhelming with energy. And his S is quite low. He's very multitask. Sit down and talk to Alexi for 10 minutes and you've covered at least 5 different subjects.
He's on the phone constantly too.
He's always on the phone and stops whatever he's doing to grab the phone because he enjoys being interrupted. He enjoys going in a different direction, as I do in a lot of cases. And the C, this is his adapted style, I'll explain it in a minute. His C is sort of natural. It's in this general, near the energy line. It's not a real strong characteristic, but he adapts it like very few people adapt it. He is a risk taker. He likes to roll the dice, try something new, jump in over his head and see how it works out. You see these 2 words up here, adapted and natural. There's the graph, and most of the discussion in your report is, by the way, this is not a test. A test has right and wrong answers. This does not. There's no result that we are seeking when we do this assessment. It's a snapshot of who you are and how you behave. It's nothing more than that. Why you behave the way you do, talk to a shrink, psychologist, not me. That's not my gig. All I do is I try to define your behavior. And I don't even do that. I have this company that does it, and I believe they do an excellent job. The 2 graphs that are up here is natural and adapted. When you wake up in the morning, for the first 10 minutes maybe, you're your natural self, unless you've had some rough dreams or nightmares or whatever. When you wake up in the morning, it's probably the closest you'll ever be to your natural behavior. I joke about it, depending on how much you modify your behavior in life, probably in the first 10, 15 minutes you start modifying your behavior. As soon as you start getting dressed and preparing to relate with the kids, with spouse, with family, you're already starting to adapt. And that's what this graph is about. This is natural. This is who you are and who you're going to remain being probably for the rest of your life. I've had my tab members ask after 10 years, hey, I think I've changed enough. I'd like to take the assessment again. I said, don't bother. You don't need to. This is probably pretty accurate, and sure enough, in almost all cases, their natural behavior hasn't changed. What has changed is maybe their adapted behavior, which is very easy to do. Your natural behavior is the real me. If you'll write that down here, the real me, the bottom of your graph. And the adapted is my mask at work. And that this adapted behavior is conscious behavior. You write that down below those as well. Conscious behavior versus the natural, which is unconscious behavior. This is your default position. This is where you go to naturally. And you'll go there if you're adapting quite a bit. If you get stressed, put in a corner, threatened, you will automatically go back to your default position of your natural behavior. And you can do it like that. I modify my behavior at least 30 points in the D category. And the D is very aggressive, domineering. Don't confuse me with the facts. I just want action and I want a response right now. And I modify it, and most people see me in a much more modified position most of the time, but put my back against the wall. Pull up to a fatal car accident on the highway. My personality changes just like that. And I've been in that situation more than once. And I'm the one that'll get out of the car and say, you go call the police, you go block traffic that way, come with me, this person's bleeding in this car. And I just take over. It's just a natural behavior. But my point is that you can modify and change your behavior instantly and go back to your natural. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Let's start going over the 4 characteristics. And what I'm going to ask each of you to do, you'll see the numbers at the bottom of the columns in each of the graphs. In the natural, this is Julia. She's naturally a 12D and a 7 adapted. So it's only a 5-point spread. What's important about this is the difference between these in every column. When you start nearing 20% change, you're creating internal stress. Kyle, do you have any internal stress? We created ourselves. We've all known the personality type. They're good buddies outside of work, and as they walk into the office, personalities can change. They take on a different behavior. Altogether, you say, where in the hell did that come from? Well, it comes from their adapting. And there's one reason that's at the heart of why people adapt their behavior. It's because they don't think their natural behavior is what the environment calls for. It's at the basis of it. Why do they do it? Because they don't think this is appropriate for their environment. And that's good to know. because it's so easy to change your behavior in a social environment. You can do it just by thinking it through, and it'll happen. So let's go over the D and let's understand the D. So we've got those two sheets. I'm going to ask you, Katie, if you would, your natural D is 24, your adapted is 32. That's an 8-point difference, and that's just how I want you to state it. Naturally, I'm 24D. I adapt to a 32. I go up 8 points. I said it for you. You don't have to repeat it. Mike,
I am a 28 adapted and a 28 natural.
not a whole lot of adaptation going on there. I want you to write the difference right down here. In case it was a +8. And I want you to write it right at the bottom of the adapted column. Very good. Ben?
Adapted 55, natural 64.
Okay, 9 points. You go up. Oh, your natural 9, you go down 9 points. Put it underneath your adapted. Will you?
My adapted is 7 and natural is 12.
Just going crazy. You adapted 5 points upward. Obviously, a very low D. We'll talk about it in just a minute about how she solves problems. Misha,
So I'm 24 adaptive, 24 natural.
very good. No worry, no stress there. You carry it with you all the time, exactly the way you want it. Mary Ann.
I'm 14 natural and a 7 adapted.
Okay. 7-point spread. Just be sure it's at the bottom of the column. Dasa?
12 and 12.
11, 12.
No,
What?
12 and 12.
12 and 12.
12 and 12.
What's going on here? This is a different style. I don't understand. I guess I'll put mine up here. I can put my adapted on later. Kyle,
Adapted 84, natural 96.
84, 96? Both of them way up here.
Opposites attract.
Yeah, right. They often do. My wife and I were different in every category by at least 75 to 90 points. At least 75 in every column. Lecture,
Natural 74, adapted 64, 10 points.
10 points. Okay, very good.
You want me to go off memory?
Yes, best you can.
Yeah, I'm about a 60 natural and about a 70 adapted.
Okay, very good.
I'm 69 and 76 adapted, so 7 points.
7 points, nothing extreme. Mine's 100, and I've taken this assessment 4 times. I have not taken it in over 19 years because I know it too well and I know I would distort it just trying to respond on the assessment. You know, when I've asked you to do it very quickly. It's the most natural way of getting your actual response. Any thought you give to it, you're distorting your response. So I'm about a 75, so I adapt 25 points more than anybody else here. And it's downward, just to be civil. I think that's the right word. What does it mean? What are the characteristics? And now we'll refer to the narrative. What does it mean to be a D? Let's go above the line first. Like I said, there's really 8 different characteristics above and below the line in each category. So there's really 8 assessments. Not a whole lot different than the, what is the Enneagram? Who does that? You've done it? You've
Yeah.
done it quite a bit. I know Lexi
Yeah.
is pretty familiar. Anybody else familiar with that? It's a self-assessment.
You mean Gurdjieff thing?
Yes.
It has 9 categories, but The D, if you look at the sheet that I handed out, see some characteristics, some extra statistics, information about the D column, the dominance. How do you solve problems? Not if. 18% of the population is predominantly big D, meaning it's the highest characteristic of any of the columns in your natural category. And you'll see going across the I, 24% of the population base is high I. 40% is the steady, and 18% are compliant. That's the predominant characteristic in it. Now, some people are very close. Julia is almost the same in her two areas. So which one? Because they mean there's quite a difference in what those two columns refer to, but she's very close. She's high on the S naturally and high on the C adaptively. So how would I know? She has a way of telling me in the assessment. It says, how do you want to be communicated to? So I want to know her assessment. In organizations that have real communication issues, there's a lot of conflict, a lot of hostility. I actually post these two graphs and how do you communicate with this person, maybe on their desk. When they walk in, you have a little placard that tells you how to communicate with them, or on their office door, or as you walk in. So it's an automatic reminder. You want to communicate with somebody? This is how you communicate with them. The rule of the day, and this is what we're going to wrap up with, I'd like you to write it down on the graph very distinctly so that you can read it. Always communicate in the other person's style. If we don't do that consciously, we will automatically communicate in our own personal style. If you'll notice, there's underneath each of these titles on each of the columns, it says either task or relationship oriented. That is very important. The D and the C are both task oriented personalities. The I and the S are both relationship based personalities. Which means that when a D is talking to an I'm trying to exchange information and get to a final conclusion in the discussion or whatever's going on. Alexi's trying to build a relationship because he's a high I. And if I try to communicate in my style only, we're going to fail in our communication. Hey, we've rolled around in my living room throwing punches many, many times over our inability to communicate. Just joking, I hope. But you break down the communication immediately if you don't communicate in the other person's style. It's an unconscious offense if you're not talking in their style. I'm interested in our married couples to, if you'd hold up your graphs, I wanted to see how they compare. Relationship and mostly task. Okay. Obviously, Hadassah is much more communicative than. Interesting. Those are pretty close. Okay. And I noticed yours were dead on. They're both relationship oriented, which is quite unusual. D. What is the? And you'll see the little box off to the left of the column. That is the emotion that goes along with those. With that scoring in that category. Big D's are quick to anger. Right, Kyle? Yep. And low D's are slow to anger. Doesn't mean they don't have anger, they're just slow to anger. And Kyle and we almost carry it on our sleeves sometimes, especially if we're threatened. It'll come out very, very quickly. You did what, 10 points or so? You adapted down to 12. You went down. So what people are normally saying, you can change very quickly. You get cash problems, you have a quality issue, you have a problem out on the site, a vendor, somebody doesn't show up that you needed help on the job. It can flare up real quickly. So, the big D, and I'm going to read these words get stronger as you get away from the energy line. I'm going to read in groups of 2 and 3. Responsive, inquisitive, and venturesome. The big D above the line. Decisive, competitive, and aggressive. Determined, forceful, strong-willed. Pioneering, ambitious, and driving. And here's the kickers. Egocentric and demanding. And mine, because I'm 100%, says butthead just above the line.
Little asshole.
Little asshole. I had a tab board. I had 7 members on a tab board for 12 years up in Vail. Everybody, all 7 of us were predominantly big D's. 4 of us were 100% D. It was a real aggressive group, totally professional and polite and civil with each other. You talk about getting into problem solving. It was just amazing how that group could tear a problem apart like no other group I've ever had. Obviously, demanding and egocentric are pretty caustic characteristics. They can cause a lot of problems. And I was unconsciously aware of that because I adapted from my 100% D naturally to about a 75% D adaptively. I did that because I didn't think the 100% D is what the environment calls for. But push my back against the wall and I could change immediately. And you've seen that personality type in different categories. And you go, what's wrong? I mean, that doesn't seem to be natural. Well, it is very natural when somebody gets threatened and pressured. And when that happens, you go back to your default position, which is your natural behavior. Let's go below the line, which most people in this room are. How do they solve problems? They do it conservatively, calculating, and cooperative. How do they solve problems? They're hesitant, low-keyed, and unsure. Undemanding, cautious, and mild. They're agreeable, modest, and peaceful, and unobtrusive. I'm going to say these people can't make a decision at all. They often appear that way, but I know from experience they might be the best problem solver in the room. I just have to pull it out of them. They don't want to make the decision. That's a fact. But maybe their reflection, their mulling it over, is exactly what the problem needs. So big D that's always pushing, I want to get results, I want to get on with it. If I make a mistake, I'll correct it tomorrow and move on again. I have to be very sensitive and patient with that personality type, which was my wife. She was like a 5% D and I'm 100%. She's a 90% I and I'm a 5%. We were totally different in our styles. And we had to be very, very careful to, we weren't careful in our communication style until I ran these on both of us 20 years ago. And it changed our relationship. There was no question about it because we both started communicating in the other person's style. And we understood that when Nancy didn't make a decision and I was asking her, where do you want to go for dinner tonight? 20 minutes later, where are we going for dinner tonight? I'm getting impatient and worked up. Nancy was being Nancy. She was being herself. And I just didn't understand it and I didn't appreciate it. I thought everybody should be like me and make a quick decision. Wouldn't be a very pretty world if we were all alike. There's over 14,400 different variations in these two graphs. So it's not like anybody really gets put into a box. You can see the difference. Slow to anger, a peaceful attitude, doesn't want to make a decision, isn't necessarily decisive, but they could still be a good problem solver. Versus the big D. We often see the big D advance in organizations because they are quick to make decisions. And it's lacking. There's only 18% of the population that's predominantly big D. Okay, we're not going to spend as much time on the others. I want you to understand the character and the makeup of the... Do you always frown like that, Kyle? Look like you're mad at me. Did I do something wrong this morning, Dawson? I'll explain on this category, in this category here. The I, how do you influence others? You do it with enthusiasm and personality above the line. You do it with facts, figures, and logic below the line. Remember, none of these words are nouns. These are not what's in our lives. These are how we behave. It has logical in there, and that's obviously can be a noun as well, but a person below the line is very logical in how they're going to try to influence you. Alexi, doing the same presentation, would do it with totally different style than I do. I'm numbers, I'm trying to convince you that there's facts behind this, that there's a structure that you can lean on. Alexi would certainly do it and looks at the assessment quite different than I do because of his high I. So, 24% of the population is predominantly big I. They're relationship oriented. When they talk, when they communicate with people, they want a relationship to be built. Who here is predominantly, or is very high I? Show of hands. Lexi?
I'm 85.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Almost half of the group is I. I take it the rest are below the line. They're trustful naturally. The big I's are. And below the line is distrustful. I was raised 2 blocks from Wrigley Field in Chicago. Walk down the street, somebody says hello, you grab your wallet. What the hell does he want? You're looking around. But you tend to get that personality type in big cities. There's no question about it, because everybody is anonymous. You see thousands of people a day. Nobody makes eye contact. Nobody speaks. You get into a little town, neighborhood around Grand Junction. People you've never seen before wave to you when they're going down the street. Say hi if you're walking down the street. It's just human nature that you're not inundated with human beings around you, so it's a lot easier to communicate. You can see the difference just walking down Main Street when there's a lot of people there. People are a lot less interactive than they would be if there's only 5 people on Main Street walking by. You're much more likely to make eye contact and say hello to somebody when you're walking by, if there's only a few there. So above the line, how does a big I influence others? They're sociable, trusting, and optimistic. Right, Misha? Yes.
That's right. I'm not the big guy though. I'm a 45.
45. Let's go around the table again. Katie, if you'd start, what is your natural I and your adapted? Now we're getting into some adaptation.
Natural is 58, adapted is 62, so +4.
Okay, very good. Mike?
74, 75.
15, 28.
74, 75. Almost no change, right?
15, 28.
Okay, 13-point spread. So a little bit of spread, not up to the 20, but certainly you make a change, and we know basically why is you don't think that that's what the environment calls for. Julia?
And I'm naturally 24 and adapted 8. So 16 plus 16 different.
You go up 16
Yeah,
or down?
naturally 24, but adapted I'm 8.
Okay,
So
you
ne-
go
negative
down.
16, go down.
You go down. And the way you mark that on your assessment, um, 16, or you said 24 naturally, which is right around the middle. And looking at my descriptor page, I'm going to put a little hash mark right by undemonstrative. Okay, that's your natural. You can actually put an N right by undemonstrative. Yeah, and down around, I guess it would be close to moody, I'm going to put an A. And I would indicate it with, this is my natural behavior at undemonstrative, this is my adapted behavior at moody, with an arrow showing when I am in my adapted mode, I am more suspicious, matter of fact, more incisive, more pessimistic, and more moody in my adapted behavior than I am my natural. That's the way that you can describe how the adaptation has modified your personality. That make sense? Okay, I'd like you to do that in each one of your categories as we go through. And I've got extra copies of this, so mark these up. Especially for our married couples or anybody with a spouse, significant other, it is good to mark your natural and your spouse's natural and read the difference in words in each of these 4 categories. It will open up so many turn on lights as to what specifically how you're different from a spouse and how you can address that communication wise. Nisha, natural and adapted.
Well, natural 58 and adaptive 45, 30 points down.
13. Okay. And do the same thing. You said 58?
58, it's I guess it's like optimistic
Yeah.
more and down to factual.
Okay, down to factual. When you're that close to the energy line, I always consider it sort of healthy, but it's not a significant personality characteristic. Wish you'd have run this, Ryan. You could have. Mary Ann.
Natural 8, 7 adapted.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Natural 8, 7 adapted.
No changes. Boy, don't you change on anything? We're going to get to one of these that you changed a little bit?
No.
No?
Not much.
Not much across the board. Hadassah.
93 natural and 86 adapted.
93, 86.
7.
Okay. But 93, that's the golden rule there. Kyle.
Natural 88, and then adapted 85, 3 points.
Okay, but still you should keep very high on you like to communicate and influence people with high energy, positiveness, and personality.
Natural 100 and adapted 86, 14 points.
14 points down. Anybody ever notice he adapts 14 points down? I haven't. I haven't been able to see that. But he is less effusive, less convincing, less superficial, and less magnetic. That's the way that you read it when he goes from 100 to 86. He's less of those characteristics versus more in some cases. Ross.
I'm about a 10 on the eye, but that's the one where I adapt about over 40 points up.
Upward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Big stressor for you to try to influence people to be doing what I'm doing right now. It's a real stress point. I'll explain that in a minute. Steve.
I run 82 normally and drop to 78, minus 4 points.
Pretty insignificant, but very high. These 2 characteristics, the D and the I, are outgoing, what's the term?
Extrovert?
Extroverts. That's the classic term for it. These are extroverts, these are introvert characteristics. Doesn't mean a person's an introvert necessarily. These are characteristics of their personality style. As I said before, I'm a 5% I. It's the lowest I've seen in the 4,000 reports I've ever run, which is so odd for the high energy big D. These are both extroverts. These are energy characteristics. And when people see me doing what I'm doing today, they say, well, you're obviously not a 5% I. I adapted 65 points in the I category adaptively. When I finish a seminar like this, or a tab meeting, or a 1 or 2 day retreat, or any kind of a seminar where I'm in front of a group presenting, I am exhausted. It drains me. And to try to do it for more than 4 hours is just a kick in the butt. It's really difficult for me to do. But I know that I'm going to be exhausted afterward, and I just have downtime.
I'm the opposite. I'm buzzing. I'm buzzing after it. I'm the exact opposite of you.
Exactly.
I buzz after every time I do stuff like that.
It's energizing.
I pace
too.
around, you know.
Well, I can get wired over it, but I'm exhausted. I don't want to continue it like you do. Below the line is distrustful. Let's go over the below the line.
Excuse me, Bill, where are the restrooms?
Right down the hall, almost at the end of the hallway. Yeah. Maybe we need to take a break in a little bit. It's been an hour.
How long are we doing this today for?
2 hours.
2 hours?
If I pick up the pace.
No, you're fine. Just gotta be work at one.
Below the line, they're reflective, factual, calculating, skeptical, logical, undemonstrative, suspicious, matter of fact, and incisive, pessimistic, moody, and critical. That's how I influence others. And you can
If
sort
you're
of see it in my style. Pardon?
If you're natural, if you're operating naturally.
Naturally, exactly.
But you know that's not what's required, so.
No, but if you sit in my living room and we have a tough subject to discuss, you know that's exactly
Or if I
how
get
I
you first thing
communicate.
in the morning.
Yeah, first thing in the morning. Before I get my teeth brushed, and you don't want to be there for that. Above the line, the personalities, who's predominant or above the line on the I, just above the line even if you're not predominant. By show of hands, who's above the line?
On which one?
I. Okay. They're sociable, trusting, and optimistic, poised, polished, and convincing. Convincing is the operative word. Warm. Notice how far my natural personality is from warm. Warm, persuasive, and demonstrative. Enthusiastic, political, and magnetic. Superficial, convincing, and effusive. They can come off, the 100% D, unmodified, can come off like a used car salesperson. Insincere, there's too many words to adequately convince somebody of their sincerity. Some people can come across, but when you're that enthusiastic, it often comes off as less sincere and not as it's not as convincing. Okay, next one, steadiness. Let's go around the table. If we can start with yours, your
My
Yes.
steadiness is 35 naturally and 32 adapted. 3 points.
3 points. Be
3
sure you
points
mark
down.
that down.
3 points down.
Okay, I want you to add those numbers up when you've completed all 4 of them. Ignore the plus minus sign in front. Just add up the whole numbers, because that is an indication of how much you adapt your behavior in the 4 categories. Russ.
Yeah, I'm like around a 60 natural, and this one I adapt down about 40.
Down 40 in this. 60 naturally, 40, okay. You know, just as a quick synopsis, this is the gourmet chef, very high in this category, and it's a short order cook, very low in the category. Just a quick synopsis. Alexi,
Natural 29 and adapted 30.
1 point,
One.
yeah. Kyle,
Natural, 8. Adapted, 8.
you poor stressed out bugger, you. But that's almost like an ADA personality. I've had that most of my life. And it's this characteristic. It's so easy to get distracted. I use earplugs at home by myself in a large house, not a sound in the house. I'll put earplugs in so I don't hear any sounds that distract me because I can get distracted so easily. Try to clear off my desk so that there's nothing around that my eyes will catch when I'm working on something. Hadassah.
Some of the exact opposite.
Exact opposite. I love it.
I am at 84, adapted 82.
Okay, exactly. I look for an assistant when I would hire an assistant, as I've had this one gal for 16 years now, 17 years. I'm so low in this category. I need somebody that's a lot more persistent and that follows through. I know my personality won't follow through on many things. So anybody that knows me knows I'm always taking notes. I have an organizer half the size of this table. And I have pads on every table in my home. So if something comes up, I jot it down because I'm likely to bounce into something else and then forget about what I wanted to do or commit to. And I need organization to support and help me. And my assistant, I hire with the exact opposite characteristics of me. I want them to be warmer on the telephone than me. I mean, between this face, this voice, I mean, it's not a pretty sound to call the office. Hadassah knows. Mary Ann?
This is my biggest leap.
Yeah.
I start, well, my natural is 94 and I go down to 84.
Okay, 10 points. Not over the top, but you go down because you don't think you want to be that precise and you want to loosen up a little bit. This is a real stressful category for a lot of personalities, a lot of people. People that are the high S are slow to change, as we'll find out. They're resistant to change. These are the people that when you put in a new software system into the company will quit because it's too overwhelming for them to have to make the change once they've gotten used to another system. So you have to do a real job on selling personalities like that. Misha.
Natural 68 and adaptive 76. 8
Okay.
points up.
8 points up. But very thorough, very precise, steady.
Naturally 94 and adapted 88, so I go down 6 points.
Okay. Both of you are very high in this category.
Yeah.
Not surprising, both of you being doctors and healers like that.
Yeah.
Ben?
Natural 64 and adapted 48.
Okay. Getting near the 20 with that one. 16 points. Yeah, it's good to know that, but you adapt because you need to get more things done. I imagine you're in warehousing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I imagine you have to bounce around quite a bit with that. Mike?
This is my biggest one. I changed 8 points from 42 in the adapted to 34 in the natural.
Okay. How many points is that?
8.
8 points? Okay. Good to know. Katie?
Naturally, I'm a 92, and I adapt to an 88, so -4.
-4.
Did I do the wrong one?
Yeah, I think you did.
I did the wrong one. I'm an S.
Yes?
72 and 77.
Okay. 5-point swing on it. Okay, what are the characteristics? Above the line, The big S is unemotional. Remember we talked about being extroverts and introverts. This is an introverted category. So the introverted characteristic is being unemotional. They're relationship oriented, but unlike the I, they don't do it with an extrovert personality behind it. What was that? What was that smirk?
Well, then how the heck do I have a high I and a high S then? I'm like this extroverted introvert.
That's what I am. I'm a shy extrovert.
No, you're not. No, you're not, Steve. How you gonna
Believe it
buy
or
No. That's why the assessment allows you, why you go through the assessment with the debriefing that I gave you, and you personalize it. If I look at your assessment, go, now how am I going to talk to this person? I'm going to talk to the relationship side and not the introvert extrovert. That's just your presentation. That's not significant in how I communicate to you.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But when I'm dealing with a task-oriented person, totally different style in communicating. We're going to wrap up with that because I consider it so important. We've gone round, covered them all. Unemotional above the line, emotional below the line. The big D personality often has a low S. Not always, but often. It's reinforced, quick to anger, and emotionally being emotional on the S. They're often reinforced, not always. And vice versa. The low D is often a high S. Slow to anger and unemotional. Let's go through the characteristics. How does a steady person above the line deal with the pace of change? They're stable, steady, and deliberate. Let me point this out as I'm going through these. The big S wants to do one thing at a time and complete it before they go on to something else. That drives a low S like me up a wall unless I'm aware of that characteristic. I need that personality type in my office. I need it as my assistant. But when I give my assistant instruction, it's in writing. And if she doesn't do what I ask her to do, I will absolutely bet I gave her poor instructions. I automatically assume it. If Sharon hasn't done what I asked her to do, I just go back and look at the instructions that I wrote, or I don't even have to anymore. I just know I didn't give her clear instructions. Because she'll do exactly what I ask her to do, every time. But how would I often have, before I was familiar with this, ask somebody to do something, they don't do it the way, with the expectations that I had, and I think, oh, they're resisting me, or they're not real bright, or da-da-da. The truth is that personality is going to do exactly what I ask them to do every time. And I appreciate them for that. I had a fellow working at the paper mills that I took out of bankruptcy up in Vermont. He had been in the same department when the department was twice the size of this office. He made those little French fry trays, you know, they're this big up to about this big. And we made a couple million of those a day on this equipment. And we had it in a big ring. His nickname was Shorty. I never called anybody by their nickname. I can't remember his name now. He'd been in that same department, first as an operator and then as the maintenance lead person for 40 years when I got to the plant. He had been in that same area working. What do you think he was? He was definitely a high S. He didn't need a lot of change in his life. He was satisfied doing the same thing day after day after day. And God bless him, because people like me need people like that in the organization. And I can appreciate them and respect them. Below the line. Who here is below the line? Show of hands. Okay. Mobile, active, restless, alert, variety-oriented, demonstrative, impatient, pressure-oriented, and eager, flexible, impulsive, impetuous, hypertense. They deal with the pace of change. They are agents of change. They can create chaos out of a totally orderly situation if they're not careful. You like that, Hadassah?
You
I noticed the
described
sharp
most of my days.
I just saw the sharp elbow give him a shot. I loved it. Yeah, exactly. And that's a great way to address these things is laugh about them. Because, boy, you see those characteristics alive and healthy. We just need to be aware. We need to be conscious. Hardest thing I've ever done in my life is try to remain conscious. It is so difficult. If you can remain conscious when you're communicating, you will be shocked at how effective you will become. When you read the person that you're talking to. And the reason I state, know yourself, first and foremost. When you do, you automatically see the likes and differences in other people in these 4 categories. You're aware of it. You're not trying to manipulate them. You're trying to be an effective communicator. Because when you miscommunicate, you turn people off. Mentally, emotionally, productively, you turn people off. Why would anybody want to do that? I'm not trying to manipulate when I'm trying to be a good communicator. I'm trying to be an effective communicator. Last but not least, compliance. 18% of the population. To point out, 64% of the population, the I and the S combined, are relationship oriented. 64, that leaves 36% are task oriented. So I'm in a minority. So I better be conscious that most people are relationship oriented, even if I'm not. And if I'm in a hurry and I don't have the patience, I don't have the time, I qualify it and make an upfront contract. Steve, I've only got a couple of minutes, but I need such and such from you. Boom, and I can ask a question. I've set the tone, I need a quick response, I can't talk about it for 10, 15 minutes. Might not be the most cordial thing, but at least I'm not being rude. Compliance, 18% of the population. Task-oriented, when you're above the line. This is an interesting personality. It's the personality I have the most difficulty dealing with. I respect them very much. I spent 9 years in engineering, which required that I be very strict, detailed, carried out numbers to 6 decimal places on thousands and thousands of standards that I had to calculate. We didn't have calculators. Good joke. Good joke. I even used a slide rule at one time doing that stuff. They didn't even have calculators, yet alone computers. Oh my goodness. And it was out of my personality type. But I wanted to be successful in it, and I worked my ass off. And it was the best training I ever got, because I had to force myself to be detailed and very, very accurate. And that's not my natural behavior, because I'm a low C, naturally. Go through it. They're driven above the line by fear and pessimism. Who here is a predominant, or is at least high in the C category?
The least one?
Above the line. Okay. Driven by fear and pessimism emotionally. You're not afraid of your shadow. You are afraid of making a mistake. And that's driven. The big C is often a low D. And why? slow to make decisions because they want to be correct. Give me another 4 days to decide where we're going to dinner on Friday night. You know, that kind of a thing. A person with a low C personality, it's not really important. They make a mistake, they'll correct it. The big C personality is saying how irresponsible to make decisions that quickly and possibly be making a mistake. Have you no sense of honor in your decision-making character? Below the line, this is the classic entrepreneur. What was your adapted C, Alexi? Zero.
Wow.
I love
No,
it.
it's like 0.5.
Oh!
One, okay.
One.
That's always funny. But the Lee Iacocca personality was big D, okay on the I, pretty low on the S, with a little bit of a turn up on the C. And that was John Kennedy. It was almost exactly the same personality type. It's been identified as the classic entrepreneur. And you don't have to have that personality type to be an entrepreneur. But I found very few of my tab members that own businesses and are driving businesses that are very high in the C. I've had them, successful business people, but they have a different style in how they go about doing things. So let's go through these words. The low C is a risk taker and forgiving. Now you can flip that and also say that the high C is less forgiving and not a risk taker. The forgiving thing is what stands out in my mind because we discuss personnel and people situations. Business is basically 60-70% people. And if you don't understand people, you're going to struggle in business for the rest of your life. The better you understand it, the better off you're going to be. The forgiving thing has come up so many times when we're talking to somebody that has an issue with a particular employee, or that employee is causing disruption in their department or the sphere of influence that they have in the company. And inevitably, when we identify that personality, whether it's through the assessment or the owner of the company can say, well, I know that they're very detail-oriented and stuff, you can put them in that category and you know they don't want to make a mistake. And when I talk to people like that, that's when I use the upfront contract. I've only got 5 minutes. This is what I'm looking for. And I'll go into this personality, how to communicate with this personality type at the very end. Let's go through it. How does a big C, we didn't go through an adapt, did we?
No.
Why don't we do that, Katie?
Let's see. Naturally, I'm a 38. I adapt to a 34. So minus 4.
4 points, insignificant. But low, more risk-taking.
I had a 42 on adaptive and a 34 on the natural.
Okay,
That's my,
8 points. That's your big swing.
that's my big swing.
But both of them down. I find it fascinating being married and how similar your assessments are, because they're very often quite different. Yours are quite similar as well. Ben?
Natural 74, adapted 83.
Okay, 9 points. Okay, Julia?
Natural 91 and adopted 93, so it go up 2 points, about the same.
Okay, not unusual for a doctor. I find a lot of the professional trades and stuff are very much like that. Misha?
Well, I'm natural 61, adaptive 64.
Okay.
But honestly, I think now I'm higher on adaptive.
Higher on,
On adaptive.
or you might be.
So
It's conscious behavior. You can
from
change it
the
instantly.
Last year, I think it's changed higher. I think right now I'm probably like 71 on adaptive.
Could very well be. I don't ask people to change, but they're going to change naturally just because they want to present themselves in a certain way in the adapted environment. Classic example is me going to a social function. I don't go to social functions. I try to avoid them. I used my wife's disability for years and years not to go to social functions, and I've lost that excuse. But my 5% when I go to a party, I'm going to find a personality like Alexi's and say, Alexi, what have you been doing on vacation the last couple of years? With my glass of Jack Daniels in my hand, I can stand there and listen for the next 20 minutes and not say a word. Perfect.
Unless you pick somebody that doesn't go on vacation.
Next.
Not too many big eyes don't go on vacation. They're doing something all the time. Marianne.
Natural 93, adaptive 94.
Great. Very high, very precise.
Natural 34, adapted 26.
34, 26. Kyle.
Natural 8, adopted 12, 4.
And you function like that. Is that right? No, you went into business. I mean, you just roll the dice. How many struggles did you have getting the company up and going over the years? Unbelievable. Yeah, you don't even want to count them. Give you a headache. Exactly. But you just jump in, you do it, and you'll sort it out later. You make mistakes, but you'll get them corrected. Lexi.
Natural 46. Adapted 1. 45.
45, okay.
I don't remember my adaptive on this, but my natural's in the high 90s.
Okay. I know we've talked about that. Sure, don't want to make a mistake in your field. I can certainly understand that.
Yeah.
I'd go from 22 to 12.
Wild and crazy. But,
I'm one of the few doctors who is on the wild hair of the dog.
yep. Yeah, that's pretty unusual. And you probably see it in your, in the profession and cohorts and stuff that you've talked to, certainly.
I'm a pioneer and unsystematic and yet explode things
Right.
to make them happen.
Very good. Above the line. These are getting stronger. How do they deal with other people's rules? Balanced judgment, open-minded, and tactful. They're accurate, diplomatic, and systematic. Now you're starting to see the characteristics and the regimen in this personality coming out. Neat, exacting, and conventional. Cautious, dependent, and careful. Worrisome and evasive. Ask them what time it is, they'll tell you how to build a watch. 5 minutes later, what the hell time is it?
What time zone are you talking about?
So basically, even though we have our 22 and 12, we can peak up and down the thing
You can be
even farther.
accurate.
You can go down to 0, you can go up to 100 in a flash, but it's where you kind of,
Adaptively.
yeah.
Naturally, you're not going to change it a whole lot. I didn't mention, I need to get this in there, the only thing that changes your natural behavior is a significant emotional experience. S-E-E. If you'd write that on the sheet as a reference, it's the only thing that changes it. An accumulation of many emotional experiences can also change it. S-E-E, significant emotional experience. What are they? Contribute. Help me. What are the significant emotional experiences people go through in their lives?
Death,
Divorce, war,
Marriage.
immigration,
Pressure to change,
change profession, professional change,
transformation.
being laid off, fired.
Absolutely. Bankruptcy.
However, we don't
illness.
experience all those things every single day.
No.
Whereas every single day you do experience the opportunity to transform, to grow, to break out of your old patterns and habits, so that these things are way more flexible day to day versus just dealing with major things all the time.
And it's so much easier if you know who you are on an assessment, because now you've got the basis to modify. If that's what you're trying to do, you're trying to get out of a rut or a box. If you know where you're starting from, it's a hell of a lot easier to get somewhere. Below the line, here you go, you crazy fools, you. How do you deal with other people's rules? You're firm, independent, self-willed, and stubborn.
Welcome to the jungle.
Yeah, exactly. Get in my world here, folks. I think it's interesting. Those are not the most complimentary words in the world, but they're specifically on how you're dealing with other people's rules. These are the people, well, let me finish. They're obstinate, opinionated, and unsystematic. Self-righteous, uninhibited, and arbitrary. Unbending, and careless with details. Wow. Let's sink in for a minute. Remember, they're risk takers and forgiving. Somebody that's a high C can remember when they were offended, maybe in high school. It can happen. I'm sorry. People remember some of those things. And those of us that...
Preschool.
How about
I remember
preschool?
stuff in
Exactly.
preschool. I'm on the bottom and remember all that stuff. There's sensitive people over here on the bottom.
Oh, the sensitive comes in other categories. This is just how do you follow rules. I mean, real low on this, I joke about it, but Alexi doesn't stop at a stop sign or turning it around. He would go through a red light in downtown Grand Junction at noon hour. Where who's the real high C? Yeah, bicyclist, yeah.
Yeah, and then he hits me.
Yeah, and then he hits you. And Ross wouldn't go through a stop sign 2 o'clock in the morning out by the Book Cliffs. He's going to follow the rules. It's not as though he can't think on his own. He certainly can. But he's going to follow the rules. It's just the nature of the individuals. And you can see where there's certain careers and behaviors that adapt to careers or that are part of a career that are so natural. And that's one of the reasons I wanted Ben to take it, because he's sort of seeking and looking around where he's going to go and what he's going to do. Why not build it around your career around the behaviors that you already have that you come by so naturally, rather than fight them? It made a big difference to me when I found out what my personality really was and what my natural was and how much I adapted it. Now I want you to add up those numbers across the bottom. Whole numbers only, forget the sign. Nope.
Right.
No signs. Just add up the numbers.
Oh, okay.
7, 11,
Uh,
14, 24. Let's go around. Everybody got them?
Yep.
Katie?
20.
20 points total. Very low. Yeah, it's only 5 per category on the average. And the highest you had was an 8 or?
Yeah, 8, 4.
Yeah, very good. Mike?
12.
12, even less. What an amazing group. I'm impressed. Ben?
47.
47. Now we got somebody that's working outside of their natural behavior style. Julia?
29.
Very low still. And Misha?
24.
Wow.
19.
Okay.
17.
19.
Whoa!
Chickens. 70.
Atta boy. Atta boy. Ross?
It'd be a wild
Yeah.
guess at this point, but probably about 50.
5-0.
Yeah.
Okay.
24.
Anybody want to guess on mine?
90.
156.
Whoa. I'm a chicken.
That's a lot of stress. I had no idea how stressed I had been.
The doctor
my
is
whole
in.
life. Exactly. What kind of pills? What kind of pills you take? I carry a suitcase of pills around with me, just trying to stay
Stop by
sane.
and see me sometime.
Yeah, I've never seen anybody over 110. And mine was 156. That's why I threw it away when I initially read it, because it was so unlike what I thought I was. But I saw myself strictly as my adapted behavior. That's all I knew. And I didn't realize the natural behavior was underlying that. And as I started addressing it, becoming familiar with how I adapted my behavior, I started dealing with it so much better. My stress levels are unbelievably low now because I've addressed this stuff. But for 20 years, it didn't happen overnight. Plus, I've given so many of these seminars, I'm constantly thinking about it. Okay. Meat and potatoes of this exercise. Always communicate in the other person's style.
Do you think now is a good time for a bathroom break?
Yes, you bet. Down at the end of the hall, there's one, and there's one downstairs at the end of the hall, too. You have this in your package. I just run these copies so you didn't have to pull it out again. The key to communications is always communicate in the other person's style. So you don't have to listen to this raspy voice unnecessarily. Would somebody read that paragraph at the top of the page? This example provides.
This example provides suggestions on methods which will improve Joan's communication with others. The tips include a brief description of typical people with whom she may interact. By adapting to the communication style desired by other people, Joan will become more effective in her communication with them. She may have to practice some flexibility in varying her communication style with others who may be different from herself. This flexibility and the ability to interpret the needs of others is the mark of a superior communicator.
We don't want to be good communicators. We don't want to be excellent communicators. We want to be the best we can possibly be. It affects all our relationships with our spouse, with our kids, with our friends, with our cohorts, professionally, unprofessionally. Communications are at the core of our relationships, and life is all about our relationships. It's very, very important. When communicating, I'm looking at the box in the top left. When communicating, these are the 4 personality types. When communicating with a person who is dependent, neat, conservative, perfectionist, careful, and compliant. What of the 4 categories are we referring to?
High C, high C.
Exactly.
Yes.
The high C. This is how to communicate with them. Now you've personalized it in your report, and you better share it with at least your spouse and your kids. Exactly how to communicate with mom or dad. Prepare your case in advance. Stick to business. Be accurate and realistic. Pretty simple, but that's task-oriented. This is how to turn off a big C personality. Factors that will create tension or dissatisfaction. Now I want you to take your pens out, put a comma where that colon is. Create tension, dissatisfaction, lower morale. I want you to write that as a continuation of that sentence, because that's what we're doing when we miscommunicate to somebody?
Say those one more time.
Well, the two that are there is create tension or dissatisfaction, lower morale, increase stress, and reduce productivity.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I've often thought about this chart. So you've got a person who's high on 2 of the characteristics. So do you go, when you're looking at how you frame your case, do you give priority to whichever they're the highest at, or do you?
You know they're high in
choose?
2 because they ran the assessment. What did they tell you and how to communicate with them? There's 2 pages in there. This is how to communicate to Bill Vrettos. This is how not to communicate to Bill Vrettos. And I checked off 3 or 4 in each of those columns. That's what I go by.
Okay, that's if someone who's done the assessment.
Yeah.
But typically you're trying to guess with other people. You can tell that they're maybe a high D but also a high I. Do you
Mhm.
just pick from both of the
I'll
boxes?
go into it
Yeah,
and
okay.
before we're done, finish this page. I think I can explain that. I think I will. So, when you miscommunicate with somebody, and this is how you miscommunicate to a C, reduce productivity, increase stress, increase tension. You don't want to do that to anybody. Being giddy, casual, informal, or loud. Pushing too hard or being unrealistic with deadlines. Deadlines is a big one, right, Hadassah? And being disorganized or messy. Okay, simple enough. Let's go to the next category, to the box to the right. When communicating with a person who is ambitious, forceful, decisive, strong-willed, independent, and goal-oriented. Alexi?
D.
Oh, D. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to be sure you got that. Be clear, specific, brief, and to the point. Stick to business. Be prepared with support material in a well-organized package. Before we go on, I'm going to go back to the first box that we just read. The big C. The way you communicate with them is prepare your case in advance, stick to business, be accurate and realistic. Almost the same in how you communicate with the big D. And why? Because they're both task oriented. That's the characteristic I'm looking at when I don't know who I'm talking to. But I also have in the back of my mind 64% of the population is relationship oriented. So that's always my fallback position, my default is they probably want to develop a relationship. A big D is going to cut me off if I start trying to be too social with them. They'll cut me off at the knees. So I don't have to worry about those buggers. So I'll try to be social. I'll try to be social if I can. It doesn't work.
And Big C gonna get depressed.
Right, right. Factors that will create tension and dissatisfaction, lower morale, increase stress, and reduce productivity. Talking about things that are not relevant to the issue, leaving loopholes or cloudy issues, appearing disorganized. I'm going to go back to the big C. Being giddy, casual, informal, or loud, pushing too hard, or being unrealistic with deadlines, and being disorganized or messy. Almost the same. The biggest difference is the big C does not want to be pushed on timelines. When I ask a big C, how long is it going to take you to do that? And they say, it's going to take me a couple hours, and it's 10 o'clock now. I said, fine. I'll just get back to you, or you call me by 1 o'clock and give me the results that you've got. Give them an extra hour if it's not critical. Let them pick the timeline and then not squeeze them on it. It's real important. Remember, big C's don't want to make a mistake. Big D's can get by with making mistakes because they'll correct them tomorrow. But a big C doesn't want to make the mistake the first time. Why? Talk to your shrink, not me. Okay, you got those? Task-oriented, both of them. Now we're going to go to the relationship-oriented. When communicating with a person who is patient, reliable, steady, relaxed, and modest. Who is that, Katie?
Yes.
Yes, that's right. Begin with a personal comment and break the ice. Present your case softly and non-threateningly. Ask how questions that draw your opinions. Now, I was getting worked up on my second cup of coffee when I was talking before. I was obviously getting more enthusiastic. That can be a total turnoff for an S and a C. You can change your tone of voice. You can change your pace. You can change your tone. You can slow down, which is much more receptive for the S and C to hear. And out of pure respect, not manipulation, out of respect, why wouldn't you do that? And factors that will create tension or dissatisfaction, lower morale, increase stress, and reduce productivity. You don't want to do that to your employees, do you, Kyle? No, don't want to do that. Rushing headlong into business, being domineering or demanding, and forcing them to respond quickly to your objectives. We do it. We do it all the time. I certainly do it. I have to be very, very conscious. It's not how most of the world works. So why in the hell would I expect them to do it? If I have a working relationship with somebody, I expect them to know me and me to know them. When communicating with a person who is magnetic, enthusiastic, friendly, demonstrative, and political. Alexi?
Aye.
Aye. Provide a warm and friendly environment. Don't deal with a lot of details. Put them in writing. And ask feeling questions that draw their opinions or comments. Factors that will create tension, dissatisfaction, increase stress, lower morale, and reduce productivity. Being curt, cold, or tight-lipped. Controlling the conversation, and driving on facts and figures, alternatives, and abstractions. They're both relationship-oriented. So the reason I go through this like I did, methodically, you don't have to memorize 4 personality types. It's basically 2. Task-oriented and relationship-oriented. You can remember those things. You'll go a hell of a long ways in improving your communication. And if in doubt, the default position is assume that they're relationship-oriented. You didn't pick it up. Walk into somebody's office. Next time you walk into someone's office you haven't been in before, you can almost tell from the way they keep their office. You can pick up on a lot of personality characteristics. Questions?
Yeah, I have a specific question about communicating with big Ds. A challenge that I've run into. One of the key things is to not present irrelevant stuff.
Right.
And what I find is often a big D will decide that stuff's not relevant, but you know it is relevant to an issue, and you're trying to explain how it's relevant, and they're dismissive of it, and you can't really, you've got this loggerhead going on because they think it's not relevant, but you have been
Tell them
involved
that it's
with it.
relative and you're trying to help them, so give me 5 minutes. Don't take 15. If you
Okay.
can't explain it in 5, you probably don't have a real clear idea of what it is. That's my take on it. I know you deal with some pretty complex, strategic, sensitive things, but be very sensitive to a big D's time management because they're always
Yeah,
looking to the results, and the results only, not the process.
yeah, it's a big challenge when you're into a real subtle issue that requires,
Then you have to clear the air and say, I know this might strain your patience a little bit, but I really want you to understand it.
yeah,
It's going to take me 10 minutes. Just hear me out.
right,
It's called an upfront contract. I do it
Yeah.
all the time with different folks, it's up front. This is how much time I need. Please be patient with me.
Okay.
Any other questions? Now, read through your reports again. Not right now, but today maybe, while it's sort of fresh in your mind, and it will have a deeper meaning to you. There's a lot going on in the behavior assessment. It's not perfect, and it does change. You can always adapt your behavior based on your just being conscious. I can be almost sociable sometimes, but I have to work real hard at it. That's it? Good? I want to talk about the values assessment for a little bit. If you can, I just need this graph. Not this graph, the one that has the 6. Do you have your assessment nearby? It has the 6 points on it. They're all values. They're motivators. I don't spend a lot of time on it. It's probably just as important as the behavior, but we don't use it as much. You have to learn those things, and yeah, that's it. But I need the graph.
Is that it?
This is it. If you show that to everyone, Julia.
Bill painted that for me.
Painted?
You painted that for me like a year ago when I came to. It says motivation inside the graph.
Right.
Motivation. And it was page 46.
Yeah.
It was page 46.
And those of you that have recently had the assessment run,
45.
you also have
45.
the changes depending on the report. The values are what get you out of bed in the morning. They are what drive you. They're the things that are most important to you every day. Know what they are. They changed my life, knowing my motivators and my values. This is another assessment I threw away when I first saw it, because I thought, because I had convinced myself I was this hardcore business person, I was utilitarian, and it was all about numbers and making things work, and my values assessment was totally different. And it wasn't until I really understood it, read the books, and understood what the assessment was really trying to tell me. There's 6 categories. T for theoretical. U for utilitarian. E?
A.
A for aesthetic. S was the social. Is it I?
Yep,
Independent?
I and B.
Independent. And T, traditional. These characteristics, there's the element in the report also that talks about your time wasters. It is so valuable. They don't have it on the older reports. It's only on the newer ones, and I can't take the old results and run the new report. I have to run a new assessment. So I haven't done it because I refuse to do the assessment again. I screwed up. But those time wasters are so valuable because they tell you specifically, based on your personality and your values, how you can tend to waste time. Let's go over these 6 characteristics. Theoretical is knowledge for knowledge's sake. It is enjoying the process of learning. People that are high theoretical will spend an hour, hour and a half on the Sunday newspaper. They go through all the different sections. They find all of it quite interesting. Who here is very high in the traditional, or excuse me, theoretical? Okay. We're going to have a little example I'm going to use. I'll be referring to our Picasso in the back of the room there. The utilitarian is interested in being recognized for their efforts. They work hard, they want to be recognized. It's often in the spirit of a paycheck or monetary compensation, but it's not restricted to that by any means. Utilitarian means, classic example is, Dad, can we go out and play catch? Yeah, if you'll cut the grass afterward. Always wanting something in return for your efforts. And it can get old, it can wear thin. Most of my tab members are high utilitarian. And it's not because they're necessarily greedy. In some cases, their monetary success is indicative of it's like a report card. How successful have they been in running their business? I certainly put a lot of stock in a P&L being very, very black and not red. I expect it to be black because we don't have a relationship with any employees, vendors, or customers if we don't have a black line on the bottom of our P&L. So we better take care of it. I take it very, very seriously. Not because I'm a money-grubbing SOB. It's because you've got to. We have an economic relationship with our employees first, and you better take care of it. It's your responsibility, not theirs. Their responsibility is to do what you're asking them to do to be successful in the company. I'm getting off point, obviously. The third one, the aesthetic. That is beauty for beauty's sake. It's form. It's often how things fit together. You don't have to be an artist to be high in the aesthetic. But I was shocked when I saw some of my tab members when I would see a very high aesthetic and say, where in the hell is that coming from? What's it about? How are they gratifying and satisfying themselves in their business with that kind of a motivator in their lives? Social. They want to help people. They want to leave the world a better place, and they want to help others. They can get bogged down in doing that kind of stuff, and they can lose perspective depending on what their focus is. But this is what gets them out of bed in the morning. Individualistic. Wanting to influence others, wanting to have control. Politicians are off the charts in this category. I come from Chicago. Mayor Richard J. Daley, the most powerful politician in the United States in the 1960s. Congress did not introduce new bills until they talked to Daley about it. He was the first visitor to the Kennedy White House since he put Kennedy in office in Illinois, came up with an extra 100,000 votes overnight to put Illinois into the Democratic column, and Nixon lost the election by the state of Illinois. I mean, that's changing stuff. I mean, he was very powerful. He died with less than $200,000 in assets to his name. But he could pick up the phone, call a friend and say, Joe, I need $250,000 down in Ward 26. He's having trouble with the upcoming election. Could you talk to him about it? Thank you. He'd never touched the money. That's how he ran things. Money wasn't important to him. Power was. Most politicians are driven by this characteristic. Last but not least, traditional. That used to be called religious. Religion. And because religion has such a bad connotation, they changed it about 10 years ago. And but it has pretty much the same concept to it. It is having a moral set of standards that you want to live by. Many of these people gravitate to church, but not all high traditionalists gravitate to church. Normally you focus on your top two. Just the top two. They're the primary, most influential characteristics you have in this category.
Would you mind going over S again?
S, social, wanting to help others. You're motivated to help. And we're going to go over it. This will become our Picasso, so you can be looking at it. And I'm going to relate. The world looks at things through these 6 colored glasses that I just briefly covered. You have a pretty thorough report, so go back and reread it with the understanding that I'm going to explain to you now. But we see it through rose-colored glasses and amber glasses and blue glasses and all of those different things. This is a Picasso. It's worth $12 million. It's an original. It's the only one on the Western Slope, only original Picasso. How do the 6 behaviors motivators see this picture? It's the same picture for everybody. Everybody sees it differently. How would theoretical look at this painting? You're going to see it in, was he into his cubic era by that time? Was he using pastels? Had he gone to the 6-inch brush? Was he still into the 1-inch brush stroke? They want to analyze all of his style and technique and colors and textures and modes of materials. That's how they would look at this Picasso. It would be very clear to them. They'd have to study it, but that's what they love to do, is learn and become educated. How would the utilitarian look at it?
How much can you get for that? How
Exactly.
much can I sell that for?
Or, you know what, I think I just might loan it to the local art gallery. They'll have to come up with the insurance on it and protect it for a couple of years while it increases in value. And I get all this press. I'll be in the papers, and they'll have a little thing there temporarily donated by Bill Vrettos at the da-da-da. Exactly what a utilitarian wants. They want something for their efforts. They want to be rewarded, recognized. The aesthetic. How are they going to look at it?
Art.
Oh, wow. You know, it's a Picasso. They'll look at it certainly differently than the others will. They'll look at the art style. And, I mean, this guy was the most influential artist of the 20th century in the Western world. He was a pretty powerful dude. Really had a big impact. How would a social motivated person look at this?
We gotta share it with as many people as we can.
You nailed it.
Because
I'm going to spend at my own cost, I'm going to put this into a $50,000 fireproof, crash-proof container, and I'm going to have it taken around to every art class on the Western Slope and try to inspire one young Picasso to take art up as their love and passion. And they'd be so gratified just to get it in front of all those folks and the art teachers and the art classes.
I know.
Individualistic, how would they look at it?
Greed.
Power.
Power.
It's not necessarily greed.
All right.
It's power, though. How would they use it? I have the only Picasso, original on the Western Slope. Nobody's seen it. I'm going to have an unveiling next Saturday night, and I'm going to invite all the dignitaries, the city council, and the county commissioners, and everybody in all the artsy craftsy, and the head of the symphony, and the board of directors of this group and that group, and have a large cocktail party at my house, and at 8 o'clock I'm going to unveil it. They're all coming to my house. They're coming to see this one-of-a-kind Picasso. That's how they're going to do it. That's how they're going to maybe influence and use it to exert influence and possibly power over others. Last but not least, how would a traditionalist look at it?
You should give it away for free.
It's a sin because it's got tits and ass in it.
Exactly. Yeah, he had a lot of that stuff. You're right. I think a traditionalist would probably look at it as, wow, one of the most influential canvas artists of the 20th century for sure. You know, sculptures, all the things that he did. He moved art in a different direction in the 20th century. And just to know what that person did to affect standards in the world of art would be, wow, it would be something special to them. Not that they do anything with it necessarily, but that's how I think they would appreciate it. Let's go around. What are your top two?
I'm an aesthetic and theorist, so it's beauty for beauty and then knowledge for knowledge.
Yeah. Boy, are you boring.
I know, right?
You can just sit on a rock with a Wall Street Journal and enjoy it. No, not at all. It's internal. It doesn't have to be shared, but you're obviously into the mode that you want to share those things. Very good.
Traditional and utilitarian.
Okay. Lexi.
Social and utilitarian.
Okay. Social. I knew that. When I see somebody that is social, I know I can work with them. Obviously, everybody is here because of Alexi. He wants to help people. He carries it on his sleeve. He does it all the time. When he sees a need, he wants to fill it. Kyle.
61 independent and 60 utilitarian.
Utilitarian. Traditional, long-term, to use it here. That is the classic entrepreneur. Most all my tab members, those are the two characteristics. And I have to keep them in check so that that independent doesn't get out of control. And the utilitarian has purpose. My tab boards, the tab members that I have right now, 22 of them, donate over $500,000 to nonprofits in this community every year and provide twice that much in in-kind services, over $1 million. They're very generous with their success, and I expect them to be. They're not listening to me. I expect a utilitarian to do more than just want to make money. That's futile. I had one of those fellows in my board, and I fired him. After several years, I just couldn't get him to get out of that greedy mode. Everything was a win-lose to him. It wasn't a win-win. A dozen.
Okay, my two highest are social and independent.
Social and independent. Okay? Want to help folks. You want to keep
But
them
also
under your
control
thumb.
them, I guess.
It's not always control, but it certainly is a big influence. In the case of politicians, we can certainly get the wrong idea. So many of them go in. Jefferson said it. He said the first obligation of a statesman is to get elected. Now that's taken that social and putting the practical side of it. They've got to become a politician in order to be successful. And it goes down the tubes. There's so few statesmen left because they have to get elected, which means they have to compromise. They have to generate millions and millions of dollars just to become a House representative. It's ridiculous. Marianne.
I apologize, that page didn't print, but if I had to guess, I would say traditional number one, probably theoretical.
Traditional and theoretical. Okay. Very good. That's tough, having a spiritual form-oriented life and then having to study the living hell out of it to be successful at it. Misha.
Aesthetic and social. Aesthetic and social.
Okay. Very good.
Utilitarian too.
Utilitarian third. Okay. Be aware of it. They're your driving forces. Where you live, obviously, is part of the aesthetic. You love it. I see your pictures on Facebook, out in the woods, in the winter, summer. You love it. That's a wonderful thing. Julia.
I'm very high on theoretical and pretty high on aesthetics.
Okay.
Same. And social is also pretty high.
Pretty high?
Yeah.
Wanting to help people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ben.
Theoretical and ascetic, and utilitarians just under ascetic.
Theoretical and
Ascetic.
aesthetic. Okay. Very good. Mike?
Theoretical and utilitarian.
And right behind it, yeah, you've got three of them pretty significantly defining. Be aware of them. Study those. They're what get you out of bed in the morning. They're what get you to put in that 12, 14, 16-hour day when you need to. Just Remember, your business needs to be looked at just like the Picasso. 6 different viewpoints. Everybody that runs a business needs to look at it from their values and what are they getting through their values, because that's what gets you out of bed in the morning. Katie.
Theoretical and aesthetic.
Theoretical and aesthetic.
And traditional.
Pretty close
is right
traditional.
behind, yeah.
Yeah. Anybody want to guess what mine are? The 6?
Independent.
And the utility.
Social.
No.
Social and traditional.
Oh,
My utilitarian's one of the lowest I've had.
really?
Of the ones that I've run. It's very low. That's why I'm working at my age. I just, not really, but I liked helping people. It changed my life to learn my motivators, because I would have said utilitarian. All my decisions were always made. I ran the companies that I did for other people like they were my own. It was my bottom line. That cash was treated just like it was coming out of my pocket. But that's just a value. That's not necessarily what drives me. It's just how I look at a P&L and a balance sheet.
That's also part of the traditional. You were a steward.
Steward, good point. Exactly, I was a steward of the company or the business owner's properties and assets and resources. But knowing that changed my perspective of how I looked at business and what I was doing in TAB. And it made so much more sense to me, and I think it's why I became a pretty damn good business coach, executive coach. It's because I realized how much I really enjoyed helping people, and I could devote myself to it. My theoretical would focus on becoming a better coach, so that when I walked into that room, I was totally focused on them. I knew their goals, I knew their values, I knew their motivators, I knew their behaviors. I had their short and long-term goals. I know their family. I know all the aspects of their life. I can be a pretty good coach because I realized it was so important to me. I came back from a seminar, a 3-day seminar down in Moab with a company, 12 people down there, and we did the behaviors and the values assessment, but we really got into the values assessment. They're asking lots of questions about it. We ended up spending a couple hours on it. On my way back from Moab, I stopped in Fisher Tower and hiked up there for about an hour or a mile or so, not an hour. And I just sat on a rock for a couple hours, unwinding. I was a blur, having been on point and on stage so much. And I sat and I reflected about the DISC models and the values assessment. And I realized how powerful and important the values assessment was, and that I wasn't putting the time and effort into understanding them or helping other people to utilize them as effectively as they could. I came home and I grabbed my families. I knew our personalities were all over the board, but I hadn't focused on the values. When I pulled them out, my wife and I, you could have laid our values assessment on top of each other and not tell them apart. My oldest daughter, my youngest daughter, my oldest son, all 5 of them were exactly alike. You could hardly tell them apart. And we have a very tight family. And it's because of those values. That is more important in a relationship than your behaviors. It's good to understand behaviors, but they can be dead opposite. Tomorrow will be the 52nd anniversary that my wife and I had our first date. We were together for 44 years before she passed away. And it was because of those values. And then when I learned the assessment portion and how different we were, the behavior side of it, it changed our relationship. I realized then that she wasn't spending most of her waking hours just trying to tick me off. She wasn't even giving me second thought. She was so different from me, so much of her behavior seemed to aggravate me or irritate me, and vice versa. My big D and her little d. Remember when I said that stress thing in each one of those 4 categories? How important that is? that you're creating your own stress when nobody here was in. I guess you were over 20. A couple of people were. The same thing happens in a personality. What I recommend is you put Misha, Eula. You put the difference you are naturally. You have one natural and one adapted sheet like this, and you put your spouse's behaviors in each category on there, and then you look at the differences and look at those words, because they can cause communication issues, especially as most of us are dealing with our communications unconsciously. And if you make it more conscious and you have a visual to look at, wow, what a difference it can make. So be aware that when you're that much different, that you can automatically get under the other person's skin by being yourself. That's it, you're done. Go drink coffee. Thank you. If you have any questions, please give me a holler.